Hi, I'm Phil Steffes, and on this special episode of Behind the Wings, we're going to be checking out this B-17 Flying Fortress. This one's going to be cool. This is part one of our series on the B-17, so if you want to see a detailed tour, be sure to subscribe to catch part two. While not the biggest, fastest, or most widely used bomber of World War II, it became an icon of the air war in Europe. Its defensive armament, its superior handling characteristics, and its ability to bring its crews home with extensive battle damage gave this airplane everlasting fame. To make this episode even better, we're here today with the Commemorative Air Force's Gulf Coast Wings B-17 Texas Raiders, and yes, we are going to be able to fly on this incredible aircraft. But before we go for a ride, let's talk a little bit about the history that made the B-17 the legendary aircraft that it is today. It's time to go behind the wings.
Clear for takeoff.
To start, we'll talk with Nancy Hutain to learn more about the Commemorative Air Force and how this B-17 was restored into the flying museum it is today.
The Commemorative Air Force is a national organization. We have about 12,000 members across the United States. We fly a fleet of about 180 World War II aircraft at about 75 locations around the U.S.
Tell me a little bit about the Texas Raiders B-17 and its restoration process.
This B-17 Flying Fortress was manufactured in July of 1945, so at the very end of World War II. She would have gone to the Pacific, but the war ended literally just a couple of weeks later. And as a result, she never saw combat. One of the reasons that she's in such good condition today. Instead, she was acquired by the Navy and became an early version of an AWACS aircraft, with rudimentary radar and radio gear installed where the bombs used to be. And she flew radar patrols off the east coast of the United States and out of Hawaii. So she's a cold warrior. She came to the Commemorative Air Force in 1967. So she has been on this mission of education and remembrance for over 50 years. When the CAF acquired Texas Raiders, she didn't look anything like the airplane that you see here. She had been in civilian service. There was a cargo door cut into the side of the fuselage. The turrets were not in place. Really, the only way you'd recognize that aircraft as a B-17 was the four big engines and the great big tail on the back. So she's configured today the way you would have seen a B-17G model flying in the European theater in about 1944.
Nancy, thank you so much for telling us about the Commemorative Air Force and the work that Texas Raiders does amongst other planes. Now let's go take a look and talk to some crew, past and present, and learn a little bit more about this magnificent airplane. Next, we're going to talk to Dan Ragan, a loadmaster on the B-17 Texas Raiders. At 87 years old, he was a crew member on this very airplane in 1954 and 1955, flying radar recon out of Hawaii. Let's go find out what that was like. So Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with this particular airplane?
I'm Dan Ragan. I belong to the Gulf Coast Wing of the Commemorative Air Force. I have a long relationship with this aircraft. When I first went in the Navy and went to my squadron after schooling, I was assigned to WWII and to this very aircraft behind me, Navy serial number 77235. And I was a radio operator aboard that aircraft. And we flew airborne early warning missions for the Navy.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a radio operator did?
As a radio operator aboard the aircraft, I had two responsibilities. One is radio operator, taking care of the communications aboard the aircraft to shore, not aircraft to aircraft, but all the HF and LF communications with shore stations.
I've heard that the Navy had a different designation for the aircraft. Can you go into that a little bit?
The Navy nomenclature for this aircraft is PB-1W. And why does the Navy have a B-17 or a PB-1W? Back in World War II, in 1943 and 44, the kamikazes were devastating the Pacific Fleet. We had over 375 ships sunk by the kamikazes. The problem was the aircraft off the carriers could not go out far enough and loiter long enough to catch the kamikazes coming in. They could barely see over the horizon. There wasn't enough time to get aircraft airborne before the kamikazes on top of them. So the Navy came up with the idea we needed a land-based aircraft that could fly a long way out and loiter a long way. They looked at 3 aircraft, the B-17, B-24, and C-54. The B-17 was selected because it had weapons on it, and you could sling a radome underneath it with a radar antenna on it. They developed radar small enough that they could put it aboard an aircraft. The problem was it weighed so much that they took all of the armor and the weapons off of it, so we were up there with no way of protecting ourselves. The bomb bay was sealed. Below the bomb bay was a radome with a 200-mile search antenna. Within the bomb bay itself were 3 radar consoles with your Combat Information Center. Now you have Airborne Combat Information Center duplicating the carrier CIC, Combat Information Center. Now instead of barely over the horizon, heads up, you got incoming, now the Navy has a 400-mile heads up. You can think of it as the first generation of AWACS, if you understand that acronym, Airborne Warning and Control. That mission still flies today with the Air Force.
So Dan, I just want to take the time to thank you for your service and answering our questions today. Thank you so much for telling us about this incredible aircraft.
Well, thank you, Phil. For me, in the service, I was honored to serve. I felt like it was a privilege and an honor.
It's been so cool learning about the B-17 and talking with crew members past and present. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, let's go for a ride. We're with Len here, one of the pilots of B-17 Texas Raiders. Len, what can we expect from our flight today?
We're going to be taking off from Centennial, taking off to the south. We've actually had to file for instrument flight rules because of the weather at Colorado Springs. So we're probably going to get vectored a little bit by air traffic control instead of just making a straight beeline like we would like to do normally. The airplane lifts off at 100 miles an hour, and then we climb out at about 120 miles an hour. We'll be cruising about 140, 150 miles an hour down there. It'll be a little cold in the airplane at 9,000 feet.
Len, how does it fly differently than a more modern aircraft?
Well, there's no hydraulic boost on any of the flight controls. Everything is cables, and you have 4 great big gyroscopes out here. These propellers are spinning, so they have a gyroscopic effect, plus the weight of the engines, plus the weight of all the fuel in the tanks. So the roll rate, the aileron control, is very stiff. A lot of times, especially when you're slow, you want to put 2 hands on the yoke and horse it around. It's kind of like a car without power steering. However, the elevator is in the slipstream, and you can literally fly your pitch attitude, nose up and down, with your fingertips.
Wow, okay.
So it's not what you would call a balanced airplane, but it's obviously a pleasure to fly, and it's a wonderful responsibility. We approach at 100 knots, which is 110 miles an hour, and we touch down somewhere right around 95 miles an hour.
Wow, what an amazing experience to fly on this incredible aircraft. Be sure to check out wingsmuseum.org to find out about flying events and more amazing aircraft like this B-17. And also our museum up in Denver, where we have more than 50 aircraft and space vehicles. And we've made it to the end of the video. If you subscribe, thank you very much. If you don't subscribe, just subscribe already. All right, I gotta get out of here.